Blue line is almost across the screen. I'm just saying that so I know if this works. Okay. Hey, everybody. It is the 17th of October, 2023. This is Gimbalabs Playground. We meet every Tuesday at 1800 UTC to make sense of some ideas together. We were just talking right before going live. I know a lot of us are impacted directly by world events or paying attention closely to these things. And yeah, I just want to express gratitude that we have this space to share together. And for anybody who's not able to make it for any reason today, or we're thinking about you and trying to build in a way that makes things possible. So thanks for sharing this space to do that, and thoughts to everybody who's impacted. As we've talked about, we run Gimbalabs Playground on Tuesdays at this time, 1800 UTC. This is an open meeting. And if you're ever looking for details, you can go to gimbalabs.com/playground to learn more and to find the sign up link. But what we do is we get together for 90 minutes every week to talk about projects. It works like this. Anybody is welcome to sign up in an empty row in this chart right here. You can see over the last few weeks who's presented here at Playground. And you can see today, and on a couple of upcoming Tuesdays over the next few months, we'd like to share with you our progress on the Andamio platform. Now, everybody's welcome to sign up. This is the process for signing up. And like I just mentioned, step one, just navigate to this chart right here. You can write your name, the topic you'd like to present on, and your contact info in the chart. And that's all. You're officially scheduled. There won't be an official reminder to you. This is kind of decentralized space making that we're doing here. Try to make it as permissionless and open as possible, but also really to have a system that runs itself. Once we're here, the agenda usually goes like this: a few moments for this welcome message that I'm giving you and community announcements, and then we reserve the bulk of the time for a presentation and some discussion, both of which we will do today. The presentation can range in format. You might pitch a product that you've already built. You might share an idea that's not built at all yet and ask the audience here for feedback, start a big picture conversation about something you've been thinking about, or if you're like prior presenters, you might do some combination of the above. And that's what you'll see from us today. Now, a quick word on this. It's kind of funny talking about the Andamio platform here at Playground because there's overlap between the Gimbalabs team and the Andamio team. Personally, I'm one of the co-founders of Gimbalabs, have been facilitating Playground for almost 3 years at this point. And we've seen a lot of projects pass through. We've seen startups get founded and go from idea to early launch phase. And so it's exciting to be, as a member of the Andamio team, presenting a work in progress and talking about a startup that we are actually launching. But it also raises new questions about how do we distinguish between Andamio and Gimbalabs? And that's something that we're going to come back around to later today. But I'm really grateful for this space today, first and foremost, as a member of this presenting team, because we're working hard on something and we don't have all the answers. And so we're excited to bring some of our current questions to all of you here today. So with that, for the first part of our conversation today, I'd love to hand it off to Roberto, who prepared a little something to just kind of help us think about Andamio at a high level. Before I do, any other community announcements or just questions about Playground structure before we keep going? All right, let's give it a try. Can I stop sharing and pass it over to you, Roberto?
Yes, please.
All right, here we go.
Okay. Let me first share the link to the Miro board on the chat in case anyone wants to take a look. It's not editable as of now. So I'm gonna have to act like a little bit of a secretary for this session, but in future, future opportunities, hopefully we'll be able to have you openly participate. So like James said, today is more of a high overview of what the platform is, what we think it is, and what we hope it does. And what we are looking from you is feedback if this resonates with you. You are in this room, there are people that we have identified as a profile of our end users. That is developers, SPO operators, or even if you have your own organization, we are hoping that Andamio is a tool that you can use that can help you onboard and collaboratively participate within the Cardano ecosystem. So at the end of the little overview explanation, I would like to ask you what feedback you have, if this makes sense, and I'll pause throughout the process to make sure that this is making sense to you. So let's start with what is Andamio, and our really broad definition of Andamio. It's a collaboration system, and that says nothing, right? So what we mean by this is that we think it integrates tools that provide the necessary incentives for effective onboarding and participatory collaboration. And how do we do that? Well, we have two specific groups of stakeholders, let's call them. And on one side, we have contributors. And for contributors, what we provide, Andamio provides is a place to offer learning resources, which translate into on-chain record of skill acquisition, which at the same time opens up access to contribution opportunity. These credentials open up. And so why provide on-chain records of skill acquisition? There are a number of reasons, but two main reasons would be, first, they are tamper-proof. So they are tamper-proof evidence of successful learning efforts. And what this means is it reduces the risk of contributor onboarding for organizations, and it just increases portability for the learner. They can take the learning efforts, the recognition of the learning efforts anywhere with them, right? That is just one reason. And for organizations, it's mainly about effective onboarding. And what this means is, first of all, incentivized learning. And on the other side, it generates data for continuous improvement of these onboarding processes. And why? Because it will reduce onboarding costs, it will increase user adoption, it helps the ecosystem grow, which at the end of the day, and as we'll see through an example, it will increase the size of the talent pool that any organization will have access to. It can provide user feedback. If you're trying to test how people react to your UI, UX, you can implement that, and also reporting. And what this means is, if you got funded from Catalyst and you need reporting on some of the metrics that you've offered as success measures, you can pick and choose the data that you want to export, you export it, and it will make it much easier a process of reporting to Project Catalyst. Let me stop. Any questions so far? Does this make sense? I think it does, right? Okay. So let's look at a concrete example of what's going on right now. And this is Gimbalabs, the Gimbalabs onboarding framework that is being used in the Plutus PBL. And as you know, if you're familiar with it, it consists of a series of stages. Each of them dives a little bit more in depth into the Cardano's ecosystem tech stack. And so it goes from onboarding, building background knowledge, you go into a specialization stage, and then it opens the stage for contributions. So what this means on top of the Andamio platform is that you create opportunities, you create an on-ramp. And the on-ramp means if you go through all of these stages until the contribution, you are a skilled, you have a set of skills that are very specialized, that are highly skilled, or you know the product or the course enough, you know the product that's being taught enough that you might get at any point onboarded to an organization. That would be sort of the end goal there, is you went through the whole process, you know enough of the product, you know enough of the service, you've contributed enough that you've proven that you can provide value to the organization in a reliable way. But it also provides off-ramps. So you can see, sorry for my little diagrams, but green, let's say it's on-ramp directly up to the point of specialization and contribution. But because we're tracking your skill acquisition, it can also provide contribution opportunities at each stage of the process. So for example, Lucas, which is, I don't know if he's here today, was doing the Gimbalabs PBL, Plutus PBL with me a couple of years ago. And he created a Cardano for non-techs course. And Cardano for non-techs basically teaches you to use a Web3 wallet. I don't need to go through the whole 3 stages of the PBL course to do this, to provide this service. I can go through an onboarding course, learn enough about the Cardano ecosystem to be able to explain basic concepts to teach you to use Web3 wallets. So that is a contribution opportunity that I would get access to once I go through an onboarding module. But you can think of another series of different contribution opportunities that would open up as I progress through any course. That could be Mesh, that could be Maestro, that could be any of the products that MLabs has built, et cetera, et cetera. So as we provide on-ramps, we are at the same time providing off-ramps for learners. And what this means is, first of all, we shorten the feedback loop, because as a learner, you really don't know what you're going to get out of the whole process. You can spend 6 months learning something and get nothing out of it at the end. So what this does is provides off-ramps that recognize the time and effort you take learning different skills. Regardless of what you get at the end, you take those with you. And obviously the opportunity to contribute if that is relevant to that course. So that reduces the list for the learner and also rewards engagement in the learning content. Another thing that it does is, if you're a specialist, if you want to specialize in a certain skill, let's say technical writer, mentor, DevOps, or any other, you can specialize. But if you're already skilled, you can also try different other skill tracks that you might be interested in. You're a skilled DevOps, but you want to try your hand at technical writing. Well, learn about the technology, and you probably will have access to contribution opportunities to develop documentation or keep it up to date. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. And finally, you get an ecosystem of market opportunities. And what this means is, if you think about as the number of Andamio instances grow, what this will mean is learners will be provided with more learning opportunities and contribution opportunities, and organizations will have access to a growing talent pool. Let me stop there. Are any questions about this particular? Does this make sense? Does the process of learning and skill acquisition and contribution, does this resonate? Does this sort of, do you see yourself going through that process and previous opportunities, and how this adds value to the learning process? Okay, any questions? Beautiful. Okay. So why focus on onboarding? Why develop a tool that helps our organizations onboard and provides learners and contributors these opportunities? Well, if we focus on specifically the Cardano ecosystem, if you look at the state of the Cardano developer ecosystem report for 2022, we can see that the average Cardano developer is a software developer that has experience in Python or JavaScript, which are heavily object-oriented paradigms. They build on Cardano as a hobby. It's almost a 50-50 split between being a hobbyist and a professional developer, has little to no experience with functional programming, is not a certified Plutus pioneer, and hasn't gone through Emergo Academy courses, and considers onboarding to be the most painful point to the Cardano ecosystem. That is the biggest barrier to entry for developers from other ecosystems to get into Cardano, is onboarding. And why is it? So there's a number of reasons, but in general, it's lack of education opportunities. And we'll talk a little bit more specifically about that, but you can see lack of documentation, easy tutorials, guides, training, or education. It all translates into these learning resources, right? And I like this comment specifically that just says 6 months to learn the basics is ridiculous. And this is true for someone that doesn't know what he's going to get out of it. Spending 6 months to learn how to build in Cardano is too much of a risk. It's too much of an investment to ask for someone that really doesn't know. So, and we can ask ourselves, is there really a lack of learning materials? And that's not necessarily the case. A lot of organizations make efforts in providing proper documentation. But the problem is that it's either not enough, it's not sufficient, but it's also scattered all over the place. There is no single repository of knowledge that you can access. There is no way to navigate really easily. It will require a lot of time and effort to find those specific resources. If we also consider that the Cardano ecosystem is growing and maturing, well, that just means that documentation can be obsolete really quick. The tools break and change all of the time, which requires an additional effort. I remember realizing that I had to upgrade my node, my Cardano node, and I just didn't want to do it because it was, even as I get better at doing it, sometimes it would take me weeks because you mess it up, you need to download it, you go through a whole process, and it's painful. It is a pain point for the ecosystem. And this is another comment that I like is there's a lack of Uber documentation. And the problem is we are a decentralized ecosystem. Cardano is a decentralized ecosystem. And there is no one single organization that is willing or able to really create that single repository of knowledge. They are counting on the community to do it, but there is no really an organized effort to do this. There is the Cardano forum, that's clearly not enough. So this is where we think that the Andamio network comes in. And if you think about each of these independent instances where organizations provide learning resources, allow learners to get an on-chain record of the skills that they've acquired and the contributions they've made, and we put them in a network that is aware of itself, is aware of the different efforts that are being made. You can think, for example, that maybe in your documentation, you don't need to teach everyone to use Git because there is already something that teaches Git. And I'm talking Git general, but it could be something specific like you don't need to teach how to build a Cardano node because there is that. And you can know that someone that hasn't their credentials, that he knows how to build a Cardano node, he knows how to use Bash, he knows how to, find a root folder, he knows how to configure Nix. Well, then he can move ahead in your course, right? You can open access to learner modules and contribution opportunities because you are aware of what other organizations are doing within this network, right? And so what the Andamio network does on top of it is data aggregation. So what this means is that it would be a decentralized repository of knowledge that is indexed or categorized because every learning resource, could be flagged, could be tagged with different metadata, right? That allows for it to be presented in a certain way. So if you want to learn something about, block frost or indexers, you will be directed to different learning resources about these things. If you want to learn Aiken and other things related to that, you would get access to that. It would just make the learning resources that are available easier to navigate. And at the same time, it would provide the data that is necessary to improve those onboarding efforts. What practices are the best at onboarding bridge this really difficult gap between object-oriented or functional or learning or going through this whole stack? What is the best strategy to get user adoption, to get users to use your product, give you feedback? It would inform all of these decisions, right? And I was going to say something else and I completely forgot now. Oh, slipped completely through my mind. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Oh no, this is horrible. I know, I really forgot. Okay, but basically that is the general idea of the Andamio instance. It is a way to create this organization in a decentralized way, to provide a space where each different organization with their different learning resources and strategies can communicate in a way, in a certain way, independently from each other, but share information enough that it provides a space for collaborative participation, right? And through these different, well, you can think of any given instance as its own little experiment that will create insights into that process. So as the ecosystem grows, independent instances get access to better skilled contributors, so they improve their products, their documentation, anything. And at the same time, it creates a marketplace of opportunities where any given person can contribute to keeping documentation up to date, mentoring others, building little interfaces, developing their own organizations, and onboarding contributors based on any derivative of any different project that provides tooling. For example, Mesh. If I want to build a front-end app with Mesh and I go to the course Mesh, I use it and I see contributors that have the skill set that I'm looking for, I can connect with them and onboard them to my organization. That is a high level, very high level overview of what Andamio aims to do. And so what I wanted to do with this specific little workshop is we really want to get your sense, your feedback on what is it that you think, or how do you see your learning process, your onboarding process through the Cardano ecosystem? What would have made it easier? What do you think that recognition of your efforts and through skill acquisition would be something that is valuable to you, would incentivize you to keep learning? What other things, what other metrics, as for example, as an organization, how do you measure adoption, if at all, right? And if you don't, or if you do, what other information would you like to see? So basically, we want to identify what are the features and metrics that we would include as a core product, or eventually to facilitate this onboarding process that the community identifies as useful. So yeah, I think that's it for now. Yeah. Any questions? Is this, I took like 10 minutes. Yes.
Okay,
I love it. Great
Oh, I'm
presentation. What?
Go ahead, Home.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say, I love it. Great presentation. The different components each imply a lot of their own mechanism, a lot of work coming, I guess, and it all looks great. I have one minor concern about how trying really, really hard to make everything be part of this machine sort of avoids the conversation around whether it's useful to have a human being helping you out for a little while. And I found that for me, from the 0 point to getting proficient, which I'm actually still working on, would have been greatly facilitated by having an experienced human, because there's a lot of moments and configuration issues and minor pitfalls, and anywhere from getting Python started up and getting dependencies all sorted out. So having somebody with experience can help you bypass a whole lot of frustration pretty quickly for the absolute newbie. And so my concern would be that having everything so conveniently automated in written form and documentation, and getting a credit for reading that documentation, we never get a chance really to incorporate or include the discussion about how important and valuable a human mentor can be. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And to your question, I think it goes a little bit to what we're gonna discuss with James a little bit later, is what is the distinction between Gimbalabs and Andamio? We are very aware and believe intensely that PBL is probably the best methodology to do these kinds of things. And if you go to the Plutus PBL, it has a strong human component. We have live coding sessions every week, twice a week. And you are absolutely right that the human component is important. What we think is that through the Andamio network, what it will create is just market signals, right? And if something is being demanded, is human needs, if you need the human component, if you need mentoring, you can simply create that need, create that, demand it, and someone will offer it, and it gets rewarded sometimes. So eventually, for example, as you could create a request for up-to-date documentation and someone can sponsor that effort, either you can do it or you can sponsor it because you have that interest. Someone would create the need as a single individual or as a group. For example, we need mentoring for this specific thing or for this course, or just request it to the organization and just create that, reduce that asymmetry of information between the demand, offer and demand. Simple as that, right? So absolutely generate that human to human interaction. It just give you the channel to request it as is needed. I don't know if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Steve.
I appreciate it, Roberto. So I would like to try to do something, point out something kind of subtle, but you're giving a high level presentation about something that's really, really low level in that, most people who aren't in crypto aren't going to get they're not really going to care about what you just said because, your end results for people who get onboarded are so low level, they have no application to the real world. And that kind of led me really quickly to a thought I've had for a long time that I quit talking about because I don't want to be redundant, even though I am. And I'll say it again, I'm repetitive. But we live in a state of acceptance. And and I haven't tried all wallets. Somebody could say Vesper does this or some other wallet does this. But I've been in 3 years and I've done a moderate amount of buying and selling NFTs and other tokens in the Cardano ecosystem. And so in that main wallet that I've transacted in, I have a lot of transactions. And I'm sitting on a lot of tokens. It blows the top of my head off sometimes that nobody makes it easy for me to sort through that information the way that I want to. Right? I can't just go call up the unsigned tokens that I bought, and when I do that, I see when I bought them, I see when I sold them, I see the time and the price for it. I can't see that. I have to go through and I have to manually say, oh, that was on June 25th and 21. I have to do that kind of shit. And it really pisses me off because what is the blockchain but a ledger? And yet nobody treats it in the way that would be user-friendly, the way QuickBooks is. And here's the trick that I think that if Andamio can solve that, they would be leaps and bounds beyond any other educational place, because I think the next wave, right, the next couple of years and beyond, what I want to focus on next year, I want to be talking to people about how to do their business on the blockchain, how they represent it on the blockchain, how they pay from the blockchain. And if they understand through something like Andamio, the nuances possible there, right? So, if I'm a guy and I make machine parts and I get my metal from some guy who buys iron from some other place, we can set up our own little supply chain and have it all represented and know that we're all dealing with one another fairly, and we can deal with our employees fairly, right? If you get those kind of benevolent business owners understanding the power that Cardano protocol kind of provides, we will have finally unleashed something, right? Something that could really grow exponentially. But we can't do that until the apps and the wallets start presenting the information in an easy to digest form for people like, in a machine shop, right? If I'm Joe Blow and I weld stuff all day long, is it going to be easy for me to just open up my wallet and see what our revenue was that week, that month, that year, see what my pay was that week, that month, that year, and see that everybody else was getting paid the way we were told we were getting paid? Can I do that? And beyond that, tokenomics. If I as a business person have got such a relationship with my suppliers and the right kind of relationship with my customers, can we all agree to just represent and believe in the value that we create through our own unique token and let that grow in value as we provide value to one another? I mean, this is the idea behind disinflationary currencies, and this is the idea behind commodities, and this is actually the idea behind everything that you do with Andamio and the way that you're structuring it, the way Gladiator was built, you know, the thoughts that were in mind there. How can we govern that if we're all equally involved, or if we're all fairly involved? And so that was just basically the thought I wanted to share. You know, like at some point, you know, as you've got the system, you can define this system to anybody, and that's going to be great. But what do you offer for courses that are going to provide a business owner any value and say, oh, I want to go through this course because then I'll have what? A fucking ton of work still. You know, it's got to have some more immediacy for that kind of person when you're talking about onboarding. And I know right now, right, this is what's necessary, right? The whole ecosystem needs developers. But for my money, nobody's developing yet. And maybe because it's not time yet, maybe because there's not enough people yet. Nobody's yet developing for, you know, John Doe, who's got, you know, a hamburger stand in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you know. But that's actually, you know, like when that's possible, that somebody with a business in some weird place like that says, oh yeah, this could really help me. This could really help me improve my relationship with my employees. Because my employees are suspicious of me. But hey, with this, I can prove I'm a good guy.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. In fact, when I was teaching, because the course was basically learning how to use Web3 wallets, I could not believe how difficult it was to really understand what was going on. They are incredibly technical without necessarily having to be technical. But I don't think there's a lot of accountability regarding adoption and onboarding. You would be surprised to see the amount of funded proposals for Fund 10 that have adoption and onboarding as success metrics, but have no resources and very little to say about it as deliverables or milestones within the proposal. And at the end of the day, what do you get paid for? At least to my understanding is to build the thing. You just need to show that you built it. But what is the return for the ecosystem? I'm not sure. And a lot of these tools seem to be built specifically for developers. They're very technical. So if you are deep in the crypto world, of course, you know how to use it. You know what it means, but it requires a lot of translation, like you said. And I see a lot of criticism to blockchain from people from developed economies. And I think that is just really funny because it reflects that you don't know what it's like when a system does not work. I come from a country where doing one thing can take you a whole day because of inefficiencies, bureaucracy, lack of transparency, opaque processes, any of the things that blockchain supports. And I can see how it could change lives just by lowering the cost of remittances. But those are the countries that are not getting attention. Those is Africa, right? And there's massive need for onboarding efforts in Africa. And what is really being done, it's marginal compared to what is being spent on developing a lot of other things. Not to say, but I think
compared to the sales that we were sold for why to get into Cardano in the first place. Well, how can it be that so little percentage of Catalyst actually gets there? You know, I feel like I'm living in the United States again.
I agree, completely agree. Yeah. To me, though, it's about sending the correct market signals, right? Feedback, positive and negative, of what is being done and what needs to be done. I'm not sure that we understand or we know that there is really a market fit to where the ecosystem is growing and where the ecosystem is going and what it needs to grow. Those are siloed. So we're building because a few people get together and decide what are the categories and what are the necessary things that you need to do to prove that you've got this funding that you don't need to return. So there's really no risk, right? You just need to spend it to deploy what you're saying you need to deploy. But after that, I don't see a lot of analysis into what the Cardano protocol is doing, how we are going to bridge that gap. And to be clear, the only reason why we're using the Cardano developer ecosystem is because, in this case, is because that's our beachhead market. That is what is closest to us. That is what we can explore in depth and can understand needs and deficiencies with the resources that we have right now. It is just the closest to us. So that's why it's just a strategic choice for now. But our dream is to do exactly what you're saying, Steve, is to get out of the Web3 space and into the real world, because that is where the real value is, right? We can stay in this sort of feedback loop of, yeah, it's wonderful, but it's still Web3 and it's not bridging. It's not doing what blockchain is meant to do, which is bridging this two worlds, right? So yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. We do think that this kind of helps lead those efforts, lead that in that direction though. Curtis?
Yeah, I just wanted to share that. So the past couple weeks, I've been focusing on onboarding for our organization, Decipher, and how we're going to bring people on and get them quickly contributing. So building out a contributor's handbook is one of the focuses I'm working on. Spent most of that time researching Andamio. And while doing so, I came to some of the same conclusions or had some of the same thoughts that Steve had is how does all this work? And I actually found, at least in my perspective, that Andamio has built exactly what you are describing, Steve, but it's in the way that Cardano's built the blockchain. You've built the scaffolding, and it's up to the community to take that and build something out of it. So just as an example, for our contributors handbook, one of the things we'd love to do is say, okay, go and take Lucas's wallet course, understand how to use a Cardano wallet. And if our platform is using DWork for bounties and task management, then go and take Tivo's. He's built out, the DWork PBL. And then go and take the Andamio one as well, just so you can understand how to do all this. And then we contribute maybe how do you query the on-chain for all of your transactions so that you can pay taxes. So, it's all of what you're talking about, Steve, how you just build out, here's what it's like to be a contributor. And I love that Andamio's built the platform so that I don't have to do all that. I don't have to create all of those courses. I can compile it together as a template and say, here's the things you're going to need to know so that you can contribute. You don't have to be familiar with Cardano. You don't have to really know so much about it to that low level. It's just, this is what's necessary to become a contributor in this organization. And if organizations can compile those courses from all this material that's being built on top of Andamio, it bootstraps them. At least I feel like it bootstraps them so that those organizations can get outside of Cardano's ecosystem and be more. They're just using Cardano as a tool, as a mechanism for transparency and so on and so forth. But they don't have to devote their entire time to stay so low level. So I really love the direction Andamio is going. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Curtis. I know that a lot of you have either organizations or have been through this developer process. And I would really, if you have any insights into how did you end up navigating through the different fragmented tools and navigations? How did you come up with that? A lot of people, the survey states that a lot of people learn by documentation. This is more regarding maybe the Gimbalabs and the content creation, but we really we want to identify. No, actually, scratch that. No, never mind. Never mind. I was going to ask something. I think it's redundant. Yeah. Any other comments? Any other questions? Anything that? Yes, Jonathan.
Hi, Roberto. Thanks for that. It's great stuff to see it all come together. So I created a question out of your non-question just then. So for me and my organization, when it comes to onboarding, then I shortcut the amount of overt documentation wherever possible, and try and bring people in through a sort of task. So if they have a job that they need to do to complete, then that will suck documentation as it's needed. So it's an on-demand sort of thing, and I think that works very well. So I guess my question around that with Andamio is, you've got a similar proposition. There are, if you're onboarding, you've got general introduction. There's going to be things you come across. Oh, this is the stuff that I need to figure out. That is out there somewhere, assuming we're in some state of healthiness in the future with Andamio. How is that aggregation done? How is the cleansing done? How do you manage link rot and all that sort of stuff that does condemn the world of Web 2? How do we move on from that with Andamio and the distributed, decentralized nature that it is going to adopt and assume it? Ideas on that and thoughts on that would be great.
What is I don't think we're there yet. We recognize the opportunity, but your questions are absolutely valid.
I don't mind.
Yes, please.
No, it's so good. Because the truth is, right, when good documentation is out there, we hope people find it. And John, I love that philosophy of giving people something to do so that they need the docs in the first place. So taking Plutus PBL as an example, this is one of the things we try to do is expose people to docs along the way. And instead of front loading with an introduction that says, hey, as you move through this course, here's a set of links, like here's a mountain of links that are going to come in handy. Instead, as we go along, right, you get to this lesson with this task, just like you're saying, and it points you to the subset of documentation that, done right, ideally learners, the real ones, are going to say, oh yeah, now I am now equipped, right? I found the docs that I needed along the way. Some people want it even easier than that, but you go backwards as far as you can, right? And it's different. It's two different tasks. If your goal is to onboard people to a business, you can have one standard that of expectations for how learners will behave in that scenario. But if you're publicly accountable as an educator, maybe there's a little bit more of an expectation that you're getting people across that line. But all that said, we are going to deliver the Andamio documentation first and foremost as a PBL course. So that when people first learn about it, it's not, and I think the best, imagine a package library, right? The best libraries, they have a pretty standard getting started guide that pretty much does this, right? Hey, to get started, do these things. Good. Now that you're basically up and running, here's a deeper dive into the documentation. And we really want to do the same thing, right? Here is what Andamio feels like as a learner. There's like 3 things we want you to do so you can feel that as a learner. Got it? Cool. Here's the rest of the docs, right? Now, suppose you want to teach with it. Here's a guided process for the first couple of steps you would take if you wanted to teach or deploy projects using this tool. And here's the documentation at the end of the day, right? We want to have a standard API doc. We want to have a standard library doc, right? That people eventually end up at. And those are all in development. But then I love this question, and we need to all keep coming back to it. How do you get people to see those docs at exactly the moment where they're going to be like, yes, aha, I got it now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I love that. It's that dawning moment. It's like, oh yeah, this is actually I know you've said it before. It's the question. I figured out the question I need to ask. That I can then go forward and figure out and understand the answer. You've suddenly got a goal to head towards, and that's very crucial.
Could just be data visualization. You do a heat map of each user and at what material access times how long they've been in your system.
In terms of tracking.
So you get a picture of when people need what information, so you can supply it to folks who haven't accessed that at that right time yet. But statistically, other users do, so you can stick that interface too.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in relation to the sort of accreditations or the badges, or how we were going to demark accomplishments. Actually, if each task and each module and maybe even knowledge point is marked with a badge or accreditation, then you can map that with, if you're coming here thinking about this sort of question, actually look at these badges that other people have accrued along this same path, and you've got this map of skills growth that could actually form a map of probably this is a very likely learning path that you want to take. And then we'll know after the fact who it is that's coming and why.
That's genius. Like these channels are more likely to lead to success ipso facto, right? I mean, there you go.
I like that. It sounds kind of like Audible. You know how they have all those badges. Oh, you spent 50 hours doing this. Oh, you're a science fiction fan. It's just those achievements, but it also is a bit of gamification. It encourages you to keep going and keep learning more. I like that. It's a cool idea.
So, and getting back to Steve's point, we need some way to share, trade, and understand these with each other, because I don't want my shit on LinkedIn, just for the record. Right?
Well,
I gotta go pick up my.
That's why an incredible example is helpful for the vibe that might keep people going, but always, thinking about why badges might exist. In Audible, those badges exist to keep you locked into a Web 2 system. One, for example, where if you stop subscribing, you can't read all the books you bought. The fuck is that? But anyway, that's a different question. Right? Our purpose of providing badges is for exposure, information, or evidence sharing across a system, right? And what we're describing here is an evidence-based system. And as it turns out, evidence-based systems are really hard to describe and talk about before there's evidence populating those systems. Go figure, right? So this generalizes to a lot of systems being built right now. You can build a DEX, but if you don't have enough liquidity to give anybody any signal to a market, there's not that much value in that DEX, right? We could build an evidence-based platform where eventually we can imagine this case of somebody who's not sure exactly how to invest their learning time, looking at examples of who's been through before and what the outcomes have been. But it's not going to be a very high impact system until there is a critical mass of data in there. And I think that generalizes just to a lot of systems that we can all imagine and that haven't been built yet, right? And so I guess a problem of practice for all of us building anything here and now is, yeah, how do you tell enough of a story to make sure that you eventually down the road have the evidence to support an evidence-based system?
I was, in response to that, I was thinking particularly around the LinkedIn sort of model, is that yes, we don't want to be sharing everybody's profiles with everybody, but if we've got a collation of so going back again, so if you're starting a cohort going through some learning material, then there's very good reason for people to be exposed to each other, because team dynamics and the learning environment are really very strong. So maybe it's a case that, okay, yeah, we're seeing cohorts as we're populating this with people coming through, we're generating cohorts, people going through the material, they are making achievements together, and you can, have a bit of camaraderie, competition, who's gotten their achievements through and stuff like that, which, all helps towards completions. But then maybe that metrics that were tracked in terms of badge winning becomes then, becomes anonymized. So you're removing who got when where, but it's describing a sort of role or an avatar of this sort of person came through, achieved these badges at this rate. And then that's what you expose to the next people that are coming through, whether that's a cohort or an individual self-paced learner. And so the anonymizations happens quickly on a as soon as possible basis. But you've still got then the camaraderie with your co-workers, teammates, colleagues, as you've gone through and started learning together in a group. And that would then sort of combat the LinkedIn, everyone's exposed to everyone all the time, but then also keep hold of that. We've got localized little networks of people that we want to develop relationships with and grow, because learning on your own can be painful. Some people built for it, but others aren't. But there's definitely something to learn in a cohort sort of approach to learning.
The collaborative cohort learning, and I think what Om was suggesting about a more robust mentorship model, kind of going hand in hand. And if you do it right, there's a blurry line between collaboration and mentorship.
I appreciate all that. My mind went another direction there. I just had an imagination of one of these whales that downvoted Andamio proposals, absentmindedly signing up for a course at Andamio, and the beans being spilled. That's just me being weird, I guess.
Journey, so some of us have different circumstances, but it's a journey nonetheless.
And James, just what you mentioned, this line between collaboration and mentorship, like when I look on onboarding or education, for example, I love to remember on school when I had the right teachers, it was not so important what they teach, but how they teach. And the social skill, what really gets you fascinated on things. And you have some professors on topics which really interest you, but how he brings you the stuff, it just discourages you from even developing any desire. I think that's something what I think is really fascinating is social component on how powerful the human connection onboarding and education actually is. And then you said in this through collaboration that we see this possibility from transforming this from an individual into a whole environment. Like, how do you see Andamio taking that topic there actually?
Yeah, and maybe nowhere, right? Let's find out if the world is ready for this. We talk about dev shortages, right? We need to train up more devs. Perhaps at a global scale, there's an even greater shortage of mentors. And everybody here, you can probably imagine a mentor or two you've had in your life. Were they making a living from mentoring you? Were they rewarded as handsomely as you wish they were for their skill? And we don't know if we will change that, right? It's all well and good to say we need more mentors. It's all well and good for any one of us individually to say how valuable that would be to us. But just like wishing for more devs, where does it come from? Is there any such thing as an incentive model that actually makes it more likely that capable mentors will spend their time mentoring? And going back to what Roberto was saying about market signals, is there a way to create market signals that make it really clear to people who haven't seen it before that, oh, investing in mentorship is not only the feel-good right thing to do, it's actually the best way to positively impact our bottom line. And I say our, like that could refer to any scope, right? I believe it's possible to show that. I believe that robust mentorship programs, for example, can achieve the goals of all sorts of, right, systematic plans that are pushed down through organizations that are still arranged as hierarchies. But it's not easy to argue for mentorship in a bottom line sort of way. And I think we could achieve that. That's a reasonable goal in the next few years, for maybe collectively all of us to show bottom line arguments for these things that are, so valuable and too often dismissed. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can have go in the direction of technical questions or wherever people want to take it. Darlington, what's happening? That's a good freeze.
So one of my questions.
Did I freeze? Oh, my
you
gosh,
freeze-
what
you
just
freeze.
happened?
Great position. You're like, it's a double I love you sign. It's really, you have to screenshot this.
Oh, this is wild. Sorry, who was just talking? Was it Curtis? Go ahead, Curtis. Sorry.
No, I didn't recognize. So go ahead, Darlington, you first.
Well, clearly I'm frozen. No. Yeah, too bad I missed the presentation. I have been thinking about how to merge what we do in Kenya with the Andamio platform, because we're still uncovering and discovering that mentorship stuff. And I spent 11 months of my life hopefully feeling upwards. There's now 8 people who's kind of gone through our version of mentorship, but it would be good to start codifying some of that stuff, and then see where that goes from there. So I will definitely sign up to do a PBL of Andamio, so I know how it works. Is that the goal, that if you did the PBL of Andamio, you could stand up a thing, you could stand up a course or something?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. There's, just like any PBL course, there's intermediate outcomes throughout the process, but the goal would be for anybody who takes the whole course, at the end of it, the project they've been working on is standing up their own instance.
By the way,
really cool. That is really cool.
Well, actually, I
Yeah.
have one question for Darlington. So when it comes to collaborating, we're trying to create as unopinionated a system as possible, but that entire possibility rests on one very strong opinion, and that's about learning targets. So starting from this concept of I can statements how does that feel to you? I know we talked about it like on COC a few weeks back. Does that feel like something you could adopt effectively?
Actually, the I can isn't the word that was used, but actually after 3 months of some serious frustration when I started the mentorship program in Kenya, I was talking to actually someone that I mentored who used to be a teacher, and I mentored them into being a software engineer that now works at Yelp. And I was having a coffee with him, and sharing my frustration, and he actually helped me with some similar statements of like, by the end of this time, the person should be able to do this and that and that. And I kind of have a document drafted in that language. But yeah, I think that I is a stronger language and has a deeper ownership and stake, but the person doing the learning. So yeah, makes a lot of sense. And ever since I switched to those like learning targets now, and I guess that's what we're calling them here. That's not what we're calling them. I think I call them development milestones or something. We've had greater success in with getting people through our mentorship program. Yeah.
Sorry.
Roberto, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that anyone that's interested in testing the beta, as soon as it's available, we're gonna drop a link in the chat to register so that we can reach out whenever it's available. That was all.
Thank you.
That sounds great. And I'm obsessed with DIDs and issuing stuff. That's my agenda for 2024.
Let's collaborate on that. I know you've been doing some work there. Are you going to keep working with proof space for that, or do you have some other options in mind?
Other options, they required some technical capacity we don't have right now. But yeah, I really want to offer more options than the proof space.
I'm relatively agnostic on what we use for that, but I definitely know that this is where we want to end up. And if the problem is dev resources, let's collaborate to create that need to know. Let's build a course that onboards a small team to maybe lead the way in helping us build what needs to be built. And we can get creative with kind of how we fund that.
Right.
It's such
the one challenge with proof space right now, and this is why I think IMX, when the route did it, so did it's not Brillia. Apparently other Italo-backed DIDs is facilitated by a wallet the IOG's been paying for and is run out of money. So they're trying to figure out, okay, well, are they gonna put money in the wallet? So that just is about to expose some level of centralization there. So I haven't been able to sit with that new challenge and fully explore what that means. That IOG was paying for this wallet that was ultimately facilitating the proofs that was being stored on Cardano, the hashes that was being stored on Cardano. But yeah.
Okay, I mean that's a hell of a scoop, but let's bring this back to learning targets, right? This is why learning targets, right? Because if you don't make I can statements, instead you end up with you will, right?
Right.
And if we're always looking at somebody else to run the system, that is guaranteed to happen. And so, hopefully, whether we want to call it failing upward or just, actually building sustainable structures, as what a challenge that has been, this is the moment right now. right? And hopefully we can keep building in this way. I know, so I used the first playground session of season 3 about a month ago to talk learning targets, but I want to always keep reiterating this. First of all, they're not my idea. This is a tried and true educational concept with a deep pedigree. And I taught in the high school classroom for 11 years and spent the first 2 without access to this concept of learning targets. Nobody told me until year 3. And it wasn't obvious right away the value of these, but where it really clicked for me had nothing to do with education itself. It had to do with power structures. And what I realized is that if there is a list of learning targets that people can understand, there is no longer a need for a power dynamic based relationship between teacher and students. Pre-learning targets, it's I'm the teacher, do these things because I said so and to please me. How many of you have had teachers like that?
That the education system,
Right? Pretty
how do
much,
they
right?
get paid? That's how they get paid. You have to do these things.
Except that if you throw learning targets in there, now there's these things that kids are looking at. And it's, I would, when I was training teachers, I would call them a third party. Learning targets are the third party. The student's job is to make sure they can do those things. The teacher's there to help. You want help? Teacher can help. And it's the teacher's responsibility to create experiments or experiences, projects where mastery of those learning targets can happen. But by the end of my 3rd year, it was, there wasn't a need to just say because I said so. There were still all sorts of reasons to, have to discipline every once in a while. There were, you have to keep children safe, for example. but there was no longer ever this need for a power relationship. And that was life-changing. And I hope that we can show the same thing here. If our goal is to decentralize, if our goal is to begin to dismantle some hierarchies, that's why we're focused on this tool. The words I can, because of what they represent, and the spirit of having these expectations, Darlington, like you're saying, however they're worded, they give all of us a way to collaborate in the project of helping everybody learn something.
And I would like to point out, this is kind of why I'm in a hurry, why I talk about, external businesses getting on the blockchain. Because see, like, if this can get proven the way James thinks and the way I believe, right, that you can do this, then that small imaginary business owner I'll talk about sometimes can say, hey, you get this much if you know how to do that thing. But if you cross train, you'll get this much. And if you cross train and you know how to do everything in this business like I do, I'll give you a better share. I'll give you an equal share. I'll give you, whatever benevolence, requires in that situation for a boss, for an owner. And this is, there's a lot of good people in the United States as individuals, and collectively they're a sorry mess, selfish and stingy, and with good reasons to be that way. But these kinds of systems that we imagine and that y'all are working on give us the opportunity to show good people how to do good and why it benefits them. And I think that's the biggest problem in this society right now, is like, it's hard to find a reason to do something altruistically in this world, right? Because you're going to get fucked one way or the other.
What if that's my goal?
I don't think you're that promiscuous.
Kidding.
Oh man. So the thing that I just signed up for, is that for the PBL, or is that for the platform itself?
That's
Not
for,
both.
you'll be the first to hear about Andamio PPL when it's ready. And you'll
Okay.
hear about it. We're going to invite people before it's even completely ready, just like we've been doing with the Plutus PBL course. So this will be an early iteration for testing the thing, thinking about it together, giving feedback. And we're very close to being able to roll that out.
You know, when full-timing Cardano and then not having a job and then kind of full-time and then wherever I'm at now, I worked on a team we spent 3 years. It took us 3 years to convert 6 spreadsheets into a web application. It was very interesting project. And the kind of knowledge and mindset that existed in these really gnarly spreadsheets that span 6 figures rows with all sorts of reference spreadsheets. It was insane. But you know, I think the company is better for it, as being able to scale better with having that stuff out of the spreadsheet. And I've been thinking about that spreadsheet with my own Google Doc that I have that I've been using for mentorship and apprenticeship type stuff that just keeps growing. I think we're at like page 4, page 5 now. With every batch of students that come through. So it would be exciting to get that into an application that can have traceable outputs and credentials and stuff like that too. Now that I think maybe we've found a path that works, or at least is gonna work for a little while. So yeah, I guess maybe that's kudos for you guys for building such a thing, right? I don't think I will have the time or the energy or the patience to go turn my spreadsheets into an app.
You've done a pretty remarkable project. Fair. I mean, and that's collaborate. Why collaborate? Can't do it alone. This is thank you
right.
much for taking those steps.
So the screen froze because I was trying to do something. Let's try it again. Hey, there it is.
Oh, geez. Why that was the screen. Whoa,
It
that's
didn't
Totally
work
worth the wait.
first time. AI is happening everywhere. It has crashed the party on business meetings.
it's incomplete without a sound effect to match. So
Right? Yeah.
Too bad the only people who can do that is high speed bandwidth, like, you know, more of those remote locations, like in your case, it would just crash Zoom.
Right. Yeah, and you have to have an Apple computer too, apparently.
Or Linux.
You can do that on Linux? Is that a thing? Nice.
No,
Oh,
no, it would crash Linux as well. Just
crash
screen
Linux.
sharing crashes Linux half the time.
That's not unique to Linux. I get it on Windows too, actually.
Well, Windows is trying to be Linux now, isn't it? Slowly.
You're gonna have to read up on why. What's the latest there?
Feels like a branding trip. Yeah, more than
Yeah, well, it's a market share thing too, right? And yeah, branding is a big thing too, but also
It's just cheaper
a
to
lot of
use.
people just it's cheaper, right? It's cheaper, and a lot of people don't like to invest in learning proprietary software and knowledge that's not super transferable. Like it's a big choice to say I'm gonna be locked in the Windows.NET ecosystem, and like this is what I would do for the foreseeable future. Anyways,
Curtis,
it's winning, it's working.
that's really. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I had a question, and I'll leave the technical aspects out of it. The mentorship that you talked about and sponsoring the mentorship, and this came up in the Odin meeting too, about almost like a subscription model, because that is something I'm thinking about, is how do these coaches who want to offer up a mentorship program and do live cohorts and so forth, how can they apply a sponsorship or a subscription model? And I know that you guys have definitely thought a lot about that. Where does that currently fall in the roadmap for Andamio? Is that near future, or is that that one day we'll get there kind of thing?
Love that. So the story we're looking at is from the coach's perspective. I'm a coach or a mentor. I am capable of supporting people. And somehow somebody is willing to pay, to invest into some fractal size of an ecosystem to fund mentorship so that mentors get paid for delivering their support to learners. Am I getting that right?
Yes, yeah. Because I don't like the existing model, right? Which is you pay this much, you get access to this, but you, just like you said with Audible, as soon as you stop paying, you stop getting access to it. It's more about, hey, I want to give my time to the students, but it needs to be sustainable and economical as well.
This one's an interesting question because actually the underlying tech is built. So basically as fast as we can finish, we're just in the process of making the UI good enough to use for kind of the initial use of the system. And we're making sure to get some of the plumbing as robustly built as possible. But the concept there, right? We have this concept of a treasury that can take funds from anywhere. And we have the concept that if there is work to be done, any pool of funding can be allocated to any list of projects. And mentoring somebody can be seen as a project. Its data type is the same. Right. So all of that's built. I think a big part of this is that's an interesting use case that probably requires a bit of a tokenomics conversation and certainly requires a close look at what exactly are all the parties going to want to see, right? Supposing there is an investor who wants to invest in mentorship, what does success look like for them? And how do we make sure to show them precisely the evidence they're looking for to feel like their investment made an impact? But would love to build that. That's as these tools get out into people's hands, that becomes a really interesting kind of side venture built on top of Andamio that could be really interesting.
I know Steve probably wants to, I do have another topic on sponsorship, but go ahead, Steve, sorry.
Something about what you said about why or how people would pay a mentor. You know, there was about a 3-year period of time where I was getting to know really well-known high-level musicians, and that made their money from performing or recording, but they were interested in teaching, and they had another circle of teachers, musicians who were teachers professionally. And what I noticed about both groups of musicians were that they would answer any question, right, for free. And that could get very specific. But in a group situation, or even in a one-on-one situation, you know, they could answer in depth and it would be so fast you couldn't retain it. Right. And that's music. And I think that, James does that instinctively or intelligently, or I don't know why he knows that, but like you over the years in Playground or in live coding sessions, people come in, ask questions, give them the exact correct answer, or as much of the answer as they could handle at that time. But it's not all that they need to know, right? Or they need the repetition, which is very true of musicians. I know from my experience in dealing with these musicians, repetition is inherent to understanding, and not just understanding, but to get to that level that they call unconscious knowing. All right, you just know without having to think about it. And so I'm saying all that to say, you don't have to worry about why would somebody pay a mentor, just the same way a musician doesn't have to worry about why a student is willing to pay them 80 or $100 an hour. They're willing to pay because they know the guy knows. And you just need some time with the guy who knows. And I think that'll work the same with this. I mean, it is working.
Thank you.
We got just a minute left, and I do have a hard stop today, but Curtis, you have one more question?
It was along the lines. Steve basically mentioned what I was going to say, but I'll bring it a little bit in. That mentorship relationship, since there's an on-chain representation, it would be kind of nice to say, okay, tying that mentorship relationship with the I can statements. So when that individual actually goes and does stuff, they make their impact, there's a way to bring it back to their mentors. And maybe it's a contractual agreement. Maybe it's a voluntary agreement that, hey, if I build this thing and it's become successful, I can give back to that mentor. But it's worked into maybe a contractual agreement or however. I love that. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Really appreciate this conversation. Thanks, everybody. Like any teacher in an experiential space, we planned a second part of this session and we didn't get to it. Great, that means we have content for next time. Love when that happens. So the other thing we wanted to get at today was to start thinking about the distinction between Andamio and Gimbalabs. And that's something we can dive into in a couple of weeks when we come back to some of these questions. We've already started to touch on it. Essentially, Andamio is a startup building a technical tool. And Gimbalabs is where, if mentorship is needed, if support building a course is needed, it's the consultancy for that kind of thing. At least that's the very loose plan that we're starting to have to distinguish between these two things. That opens up a whole bunch of new questions. And so we'll save that one. But is 3 weeks from now, if we come back to that question, does that sound okay? Nice. John, you were muted. Sorry.
I just said perfect. And thanks, Roberto, as well. Great presentation. Nice one.
Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me, guys. I hope it was not too bad.
Oh,
And-
you use Playground exactly how it's supposed to be used. We're practicing. We're learning how to talk about this stuff. And I
Yeah.
appreciate you for creating that space where we can be learning together. Thank you. Well seen and really appreciate it.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
next week, we're going to start playing around with Mesh PBL at Playground. So another kind of learn by example there too. Really appreciate once again the time today. See everybody soon.
Thanks all.